Welcome. We have another episode of The Weird Way here, and I am delighted to be dropping in today as I feel like I've been going through a lot of changes, and when I go through a lot of changes, I always feel like there is more gold to share in this space. And so today I want to dive a little bit into following the thread, letting go of the story, and just trusting the process. And this is relevant to my own life right now, as one of the things I love to do on here is share about my own journey, how it's relating to a lot of the topics I'm speaking to, because at the moment I've just moved into my new house and living on top of a mountain with a beautiful view, and just noticing what occurred for me in that journey leading up to it and what I went through to end up where I am, and just allowing that process to really be what it has been. So I'll preface this by saying that in the past, I've been someone who has wanted to know everything. I've wanted to know how everything needs to look. I wanted that sense of control of, okay, this is going to happen, then that's going to happen, and then this will happen, and try to create the plan in my head before it's even happened, so I can have a sense of control. And now I wanted that because in control I felt safe, or my ego felt safe, and I didn't have to trust into something bigger. I was like, if I can control everything, then there's no risk of me getting hurt. There's no risk of anything going wrong, because that's the perfectionist. It's like, oh, if I can make everything right, there'll be no problems, no mistakes, and my ego may not have to suffer that wound. Now, this was very much me, and being who I've been in the past, and a lot of my journey has been about releasing that control, or the need to control in the same way. And this is important because a lot of the people that I work with, they come to me for a various variety of reasons, and it could look like they have a dream, they feel like a higher purpose calling them, they can feel like, oh, something's going wrong in their relationships, but under it all, there's this deeper desire to connect to a bigger picture, something outside of themselves, and feel like something else is guiding them. And for me, I call that soul. Some people call it the holy guardian angel, the higher self, the daemon, whatever it is for you. But there's this thread that we can follow that allows us to be in flow and in harmony with the universe. And for me, this is what I spoke to about alignment in one of my recent episodes. If you haven't listened to that, go back and check that out. It was a great episode. And for me, over the last few weeks, I've moved. So at the start, it ended up I had to be out of the place I was in earlier than expected. I thought I may still have another week there, and that would have lined up perfectly with everything, but some circumstances changed and I had to move out earlier than expected. Now that's all okay. I ended up staying with some friends, and I ended up staying at an in-between house where I knew I was just going to be for a short period of time before landing into my new space. Now, in that process in the past, I would have been stressed, I would have been anxious, I would have been trying to control, and I would have been like, oh, what do I do? What do I next? And instead, I embraced this process and I allowed myself to be in the process, trusting. So the new place was a town I moved to about an hour and a half away from where I lived before. And I said yes to the in-between place, the place where I knew I was only going to be at for a short time before I had any guarantees of the new place I actually landed in. So before this, I've been looking for a house for about 6 weeks before I moved. I was looking in a certain area and I wanted certain things, and I was like, okay, this is where I want to go and this is what I need to happen. But I didn't find anything. I did find there was a possibility of a space that for a little bit it was okay. And so what I did was take the next step. And I stepped into that space, which was an in-between house. And when I did that, another house appeared, which is the one I'm living in now. And so why this is important is because too often I've seen this in myself and I see it in other people, is that they want to know the end result, or they want to know that everything's going to work out. And we can get caught up in this idea: if I can control, if I know what happens next, I will feel safe and then everything will be guaranteed. But this is the illusion, because there is no safety guarantee. The only guarantee is death. And I believe we can actually trust in death, because think for a moment, everyone else has had to go through it in their lives. Everyone on this planet who's lived before us has had to die. It doesn't mean it doesn't scare me at times, but it means like, oh, there's this deeper invitation into trust in that process. And this is what a lot of control is about, preventing ourselves from dying. And this is more about the ego dying, the psycho-spiritual death I recently talked about. Because when we confront that our ego, or who we think we are, can die, it means releasing who we are. And when we do that, it's like, oh, am I now? And we go through this stage of learning, and that means there's none of the same boxes or boundaries in place, and it can be confronting. It's like, oh, I don't know who I am anymore. Oh, I've got to learn this. Oh, how are people going to view me? Maybe they won't like me when I'm like this, or I won't be loved, or, in business, oh, if I'm more of myself, people won't like me anymore. But that they're the fears that keep us in them boxes. And so in these processes where it's like, oh, I want to control, for me, the invitation has always been to follow the thread. And that's been the biggest path of my spiritual journey. And for anyone on this path and following their own journey, for me, it's this journey of surrendering the expectation of what it looks like, and allowing what is, and allowing the aliveness to guide us. And I've noticed this many, many different times on my own journey. Like when I started this work, I was obsessed by breath work. This was like the first kind of thing that called to me in the spiritual world. Before that, there was some meditation and some yoga, and quite a bit of plant medicine. But that really led me to the work of Stanislav Grof, who was one of the holotropic breathwork founders, who rediscovered holotropic breathwork after the illegalization of LSD in the 1960s. And his work really called to me at the time. And I became really obsessed. I learned a lot. I ended up working with some breathwork practitioners that really allowed me to deepen on my path. But I didn't know what that was going to look like. And in that process, I was also able to let go of the idea that maybe I become a breathwork facilitator and that, because I actually never followed that path, because my path took me elsewhere, more into shamanic work, into plant medicine spaces where we're working within, such as cacao and ritual and medicine, and it really served me. So breathwork, though I believe it was a beautiful part of my journey, and I believe I continue to re-own that and integrate that more, it wasn't my actual path. And I see too many people get stuck in a certain dogma of like, okay, I'm this, so I'm this. And this is just an egoic construct that says this is my identity now. And this isn't true. We need to continue to release that identity over and over again, while also at times allowing that identity to form. And this seems like a paradox. And if you haven't guessed yet, I deal with a lot of paradox, because like at the moment I'm speaking, I'm creating a podcast. I've created a podcast. So I am, in a sense, leveraging the identity of Dean and his knowledge to create a brand. Like if you think of my social media as a brand, because that's what people associate with me, I've leveraged my egoic construct of my idea of Dean to create a blueprint of me in the digital world. Now, what this does is it allows people to connect and have a sense of who I am as an individual. And though at times I recognize I am more than that egoic construct, I realize I am also that egoic construct. So we're working in the paradox of this. But what happens along the way is I find there's I feel it's like the infinity sign where at times it's like, okay, embrace ego, let it go. Embrace ego, let it go. It's this death and rebirth cycle that we're talking about. And I'm sure if you're listening that you've gone through your own deaths on this journey where it's like, oh, I thought I was this, and then I need that to die so I can become who I am. And any time I've said yes to a container or said yes to something else, I find that happens. Now, the process now is a lot less intense than it has been in the past, and I believe I've spoken about this in my earlier episodes, but it's this acknowledgement that, oh, okay, I'm releasing this identity. And this is what is required to actually follow the thread, because if you get stuck in a box, and there's nothing wrong with being in a box as long as it's the right box and it allows that box to be open so you can expand beyond it as well, because if you're just stuck in that singular box forever, well, that's going to be quite limiting. And if you can never get out of that box, it's like, oh, well, it's just a dark room. And trust me, that's not fun. It's where I spent a lot of my life. And so in this, when we follow that thread, it's like, oh, cool, what's alive? Where am I being drawn to? And people will be like, oh, they want to create a story around this. And this comes into my second piece of letting go of the story. And I'll use an example here. So the first time I worked with a coach was working with Hallie Rose, and that was over 3 years ago now, and it was a beautiful experience. But it was like I just started coaching myself. I was doing a little bit of coaching for about 6 months, but I was also very deep in my spiritual journey, wondering what the hell I was doing in this world and who am I, and really going through that existential crisis. But I worked with her and I was like, yeah, I really, really want to learn how to coach people. I want to know how to coach people, and I want to know how to build a business so I can do this full time and serve people. Now, that was the story that made me say yes to coaching. And it was a perfectly valid story. Like, I would say yes to this coaching again. It at the time was about $7,000 for 3 months of coaching. I'd never invested in a coach before that. So this scared the fuck out of me. It was everything I had in my bank account. And I was like, what am I doing? But some part of me knew that that was right. And it was a big step. But in that process, I went through one of the biggest spiritual deaths and ego transformations of my life. There was points where I was really struggled. I didn't know who I was. I was in the depth of my emotions. I was having identity crises, which I'll probably talk about on another episode at some point. But in that, if I held onto the story of, oh, I'm here to coach others and I'm here to learn how to coach and this is what this is going to be about, I would have really limited my spiritual growth, because that's what I thought I was going to do. But really, I needed to go on this inner transformation to become the person that was able to coach others. I needed to go to my own depths so that I could show up in a way where I was the person who was a coach. And for me, this is like what my work is really about. Like I have conversations with people and it's like, yeah, we can have a look at the problems. And if I'm honest, most people that I have conversations with, and I can be wrong here, but we think we need something because of the surface level problem that's presented within our lives, whether that be financial, relationship, purpose. And what we're actually seeking beneath that is deeper meaning, a deeper spiritual meaning, like connection to our soul and our true path. Now, I feel that can be, in the modern world, that's different to purpose, because purpose for me, like there's the connotations I have about that is a very masculine drive of, I'm here to do my purpose and hold this down, and I'm here to get somewhere, and I'm here to create, and like that's all beautiful. I do that, like, but that's different to one's path, generally with that connotation. Like it can be the same thing for a lot of people, but in the modern age, I see that dichotomy that separates them two. And for me, path is more about like the one our soul is here to walk, and our purpose may be an iteration of that, but it's probably not that. So my business is like a vehicle for my soul work, but it's not that my actual soul work. And some of you will get that distinction while others may not. And so in that coaching container, I went on that transformation. And this for me is what keeps the aliveness going. So if we actually follow what's alive and it's like, oh, I feel the call there. And like we could speak about the hero's journey where it's that call. It's like, yeah, your soul knows there's something coming here. It's like, oh, am I willing to say yes? But that call is an invitation of, oh, there's something here. Now, for a lot of us, we need to rationalize this and make this logical through stories in our mind. So for people I work with, it can be like, oh, cool, you can help me build a business and further my own business. And that makes sense to my logical mind. So we can have that conversation, and I'm willing to invest in that. And that's beautiful because them results do happen because a person's gone on a deeper transformation. But it's this level of consciousness that we're looking at. It's like, yeah, we can address the surface level problems, but they're only showing up because there's a ripple in the pond, that there's a deeper layer that we need to look at it. The way I like to think of it, imagine a clear pond. Now, if you drop a rock in the middle of that pond, there's waves that get sent out and they splash upon the shores. And if we were to look at surface level problems of why people mostly work with a coach or whatever it is, transformational work, it shows up in these surface level problems. Like, so the waves lapping at the shore, it's like, oh, this is what's visible. If you're just standing on the shore, you only see the waves that are hitting the shore. But the deeper problem is the rock that's splashed in the middle. That's what caused the ripple to occur. So a job as what I see my job as a coach is to actually get to that deeper problem. And this is why we need to let go of the stories that we tell ourselves, because if it's like, okay, I'm here to do this thing and this thing's really important. Yes, it is. And also, what's beneath that? What is the thing that is actually causing you upset? What's the deeper pain? Because if we can address this, and this is where we look at unconscious beliefs, trauma healing, like inner child work, this is where we get to really go into the somatic body and repattern a person to see a deeper layer. It's like, oh, there's something here. And then when we work with that, it's like, oh, naturally the waves stop. If we, this analogy loses itself here, but if there's no rock that falls in the pond's got to stay flat. And so we don't need to worry about the waves coming to shore. There's just no waves. And of course we probably want waves in our life, and everyone learns this, that when we up level, hey, we still have problems. They just probably get better. And if your problems aren't getting better, well, that in itself is a problem and something that should be looked at. But that's the invitation to have a look and be like, oh, right, my problems, they're not getting better. Why is that? Oh, I'm not following my path. And I've spoke about pain before, where pain often just comes from our soul calling to ourselves. And it's like, yo, come back here. You're going the wrong way, man. And I feel that deeply. So I've talked on that on another episode. If you want that deep dive, I believe it was in the psycho-spiritual death and depression, which makes sense because that for me is what depression is, that period where our soul's like, yo, this was the wrong way. You're not being who you are. So here's a better way, or here's a choice to make so you can decide if you want to go a different way. And if you do, we got you. And so what I really want to iterate here is that the spiritual journey is one that will ask us to release a lot of the ideas about what it means to be spiritual, what the spiritual journey looks like, and go beyond a lot of the cultural conditions, societal expectations, and also self-identification with certain labels within it. And so, like for me, this is why I'm talking about business and spirituality. I see the two deeply linked, or they can be deeply linked. And if you listen to this, I'm assuming that's probably somewhat of your path, is that, yeah, business can be a reflection for ourselves. It's a way for us to see ourselves. And I know for me, a lot, like I talked about this, the surface level being the invitation for something deeper. And I can see that with my business. Like my business has just been a drive for myself to go on my own spiritual evolution. Because at the start, it was like, at my first coach, it was like, yes, I want to create clients and I want to know how to coach people and I want to serve. And then I went on my journey. Now, a lot of the things I've done, I've invested in because of my business, because that allowed me a level of justification. Now, it was probably never about my business truly, because most of my containers have actually just allowed deep transformational and spiritual growth. Now, through that process, my business has expanded because I've become the person that naturally has a business that is expanded. Like the person who started my journey isn't the person that's sitting here talking now. They're two very different people. And this version of myself is someone who has a successful business and is able to operate that, coach people, help people, serve people. And so really it was about going on that journey to become this version of myself. And this is what I want to tell you, is that the goal may feel surface level. And this is beautiful because originally any goal will have some level of surface levelness to it. It will be attached to the level of the identity. It will be like, I want to go to the gym to look better and have big muscles and attract women. Now that's great. That's a great goal to have. But after a while, a person, if they continue on that journey, they'll get to a point where it's like, cool, I've got the body, I've got the muscles. I feel more confident, if that was what it was, or maybe it didn't. You don't have more confidence. You look better, but you're still shy around women. And then a deeper question will emerge of like, okay, what's the real purpose of this? What's a deeper meaning? Because as people, we always want a meaning associated with what we do. If at that point it's like, cool, I've got everything I wanted. Well, it's either quit, keep going for the same reward, and most people, if it's just a reiteration of doing the same thing for the same reward, there's a point where it gets boring. So a higher purpose needs to be developed. Now, this higher purpose, if we're using the gym example, could be like, oh, I'm doing this for mental clarity so I can have purpose and feel more energized when I'm working on my mission, so I can have a bigger impact. Like that's another level of looking at the gym. It's a tool to maintain the body and up-level the body. Now, this is a higher purpose than vanity metrics, which was originally the goal. So to actually follow the surface, desires will lead to depth. And this is what a lot of people can have shame for, is like, oh, I have a desire, and maybe that desire is viewed as vain or something else, or like it could be a desire around money. Like I know for me, that was like a big one hard one to own, was like, oh, I desire to make money. And I was like, oh, I'm spiritual. I can't own that. And I was scared to own that. But when I began to own that, I started to think in a different way. I was like, oh, I desire money, yes, to have a better lifestyle and to provide for myself in a way where I work full time for myself. Okay, I've made that. Oh, now what do I want to do with money? Oh, I could just make more money so I can buy more stuff. But is that going to fulfill me? Like there's a little bit of fun and excitement from that, but there's also like, oh, right, I've got there. What's next? And it's like, oh, right. now when I look at money, I'm like, there's a deeper meaning, because I know when I make more money, I can have a deeper impact. I can invest in my own journey and development, and then learn from teachers, so then I can have bigger impact and affect more people and help more people. I can give my time more freely to people that maybe couldn't afford my services. I could have conversations with people that maybe I couldn't have had before. I can put myself in spaces which allow me to evolve, so that then I can help others do the same. Now, this is the deeper level that is emergent, and this happens for everyone. Like, if we follow the vanity or the like surface desire, it will lead us to depth if we allow it to emerge and move through us. Because unless we get too attached, like there is always a tyrannical like man on Wall Street. That's the example that comes in, where it's like money's the thing. But there's a fear that's associated with that of like, oh, I can't lose money, so I've got to hold and I've got to control, and going back to control, like it's not going to work. So it's like to question the deeper meaning, and this about wraps it up in like, okay, I follow the thread, because at the start, like you may be listening to this and being like, okay, I don't know where to begin, or I don't know what's next, or it's like, cool, what are you feeling called to? Like what's alive in your world? It's like, oh, I've had a lot of conversations with men lately who've wanted to serve other people, and it's like, cool, like there's a desire there. Okay, cool, let's follow that. Like, what's the next step? Maybe it's like, oh, I want to learn music. It's like, oh, follow that thread and see what emerges. Maybe it's not what you expect. Maybe you learn music and then you get invited into a band that plays worldwide. Or maybe you start learning music, you go down to the beach and you start playing music, and then a woman comes by, comments on it, and you meet the love of your life. And it's like, oh, we don't know the reason of the why. But there's a aliveness in ourselves that if we give ourselves permission to follow, it will lead us somewhere of more depth, of more interconnectedness, and a deeper meaning in this world. And if we can release the stories along the way, something will reveal itself that will then give that person meaning, fulfillment, and a deeper sense of why in this world. And in this process, they'll deeply connect themselves to their soul and to why they're here. So I'm going to leave that there. That felt like a mic drop moment. I'll be back next week. If you haven't yet, please rate this podcast. It helps spread this, get it out there. I'm going to be inviting other people back on the podcast in the next couple of weeks. So if you have anyone you feel would be suitable for this podcast, please reach out, send them my way. And at the moment, I've got a couple one-on-one spots open. So if you're looking and interested in this work, or you want a conversation, reach out, send me a message. I do a free call for people that feel like a right fit. There's no expectations. I do just love to help people, especially when they're aligned in this work. And if there is deeper work to be done, so be it. But at the moment, let's just have a conversation, see where you're at, and get to know each other. So much love. This is Dean Bentley on The Weird Way. Have a beautiful day.